Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today. I'm Galen from Quixel here. I'm an evangelist here at the company.
And hi, I'm Teddy Bergsman. I'm director of Quixel at Epic.
Today, we're going to be covering a couple different things for you guys. We're going to start in the early days of Quixel, go over some of the history. We're going to cover all of our current offerings today, and then give you guys a little bit of a glimpse into some of the things that are happening in the future. So, Teddy, why don't we start with a little bit of an introduction for each of us? So, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure. So, my background is in 3D graphics and system engineering. I worked in the AAA games industry for 5 years, developing 3D scanning hardware and texture automation software before starting Quixel almost 10 years ago now, together with Bakar Azim. And today at Epic, as director of Quixel, I'm responsible for the success and vision and goals for our scanning missions.
And then I've worked personally as an environment artist in the games industry, a senior art lead, and worked on a couple different games like BioShock, Borderlands, Evolve, some Star Wars games, and the most recent God of War. And as an evangelist at the company, primarily my job is to obviously evangelize the product, speak to all of our existing clients, and also speak with teams that might be looking to potentially leverage Megascans technology across all the different verticals that we work inside. So, Teddy, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of the company?
Sure. So, around 10 years ago, Bakar and I, we left the games industry to build what we wanted to become the world's largest scan library. And that was to help artists get access to very high quality content that typically was only available to really large studios within the games and film industry. And to build that content library, we figured that scanning would be the way to go to produce the highest quality, most photorealistic content. But seeing as there were no off-the-shelf scanners back then, we decided to build our own. Now, building scanners is something that I've been passionate about since a kid, essentially. And I built scanners all through my teens. And Vakar was also a big mechatronic nerd. And luckily, we found each other, and together we built the first hardware prototype that came to lay the foundation for the Megascans library. Now, the first prototype was a big, scary box, and it got us into a lot of trouble. We were held at gunpoint at one time, and overall, it was just a very intimidating device. But over the years, this technology has significantly been streamlined. With every new trip, we bring back feedback to our hardware teams, and the hardware is becoming smaller, more portable, lightweight, easier to operate. And today it's a handheld device. And we build these scanners simply so that we can create the highest quality content possible. But building these prototypes and scanners and teams to scan all over the world is not an inexpensive endeavor. And so we had to fund that entire operation. And to do so, I wrote a number of tools for artists to help streamline the texturing process. So one of those tools was Endo, which allowed you to create normal maps straight in Photoshop. For instance, taking a photograph and turning it into a 3D material, or using selections and brushes and vectors inside of Photoshop to convert them to normals in real time. And this was generally a much faster workflow than modeling something by hand in a 3D software just to bake down a 2D map. Here you would actually be in 2D the entire time, and you would have real-time control over your results. Now, we were very lucky to see a small community form around this tool, and it helped us create even more art tools, one of them being Dido. And together we called this suite of tools the Quixel Suite. And it was focused on just automating and streamlining the texturing workflow for artists straight in Photoshop. So, for instance, introducing the Smart Material, which allowed you to automatically texture any 3D object with very realistic results, because we actually based these materials on the very earliest version of the Megascans library. So you would have scan-based wear and tear, you would have real-time 3D painting, plus the real-time normal editing capabilities of Endo, all within one singular texturing workflow.
And obviously, this time in the industry is very near and dear to my heart. This tool set came out at a very important time for me as an artist, and I immediately knew this was something I needed to add to my tool belt. So it was a really awesome time too, because this was actually when Teddy, you and I met for the first time digitally, but we were pen pals of sorts over Polycount, and you were sending me early builds of both Endo and Dedo. And I would eventually go on to do a contest with Quixel as well. And that was just a ton of fun early on in my career. So the original vision for the library was that of a digital prop house. In Hollywood, creators can drive to these massive prop houses, fill U-Hauls with everything they possibly need to shoot their film, and effectively, the Megascans library is a digital version of that. We have a wide offering in the library in that we offer not only surfaces, but 3D assets, atlases, decals, vegetation, and everything in between. Really, when we go to an ecoregion to scan, we're getting everything that we can really get our hands on, be it the largest cliff wall down to the smallest rock, twig, leaf, and branch. And while the Megascans library is the cornerstone of what we'll be discussing today, we also have other components in Bridge and Mixer that we'll be covering briefly here today in this talk.
So Bridge is a content management system and it allows you to export assets straight into Unreal with a single click. Mixer is a texturing tool that allows you to 3D paint assets, create surfaces, stylize things, combine procedurals with scan data, and so much more. So today, Quixel is a team of 150 people with scan teams spread across 6 different continents, scanning content every single day in any type of environment you could imagine. From glaciers to jungles to savannas to temples, we really want to bring you all of the content that you could possibly imagine.
So at the beginning of last year, we set out to do something that we've actually never done before, which is create a high-quality cinematic using all Megascans assets inside of Unreal Engine. This cinematic was predicated on an entire scan trip to Iceland that was actually a month long. Our scan teams went out in some of the worst possible conditions for several weeks, and they came back with some of the most diverse and interesting ecoregions that we've ever captured inside of the Megascans library. And what we set out to achieve was create a photorealistic environment and cinematic with a very, very small team, all running in real time in Unreal Engine. And one of the things that was really exciting about working on this project specifically was that we had game-focused artists that were actually working in coordination with VFX level supervision. And this allowed us to really create an awesome synergy between the two industries, pull and learn from each other in a new and exciting way here using real time as the vessel. And one of the exciting outcomes of working on this demo was that it brought us very close with Epic Games. We were able to interface with their teams across many steps of the way, and in working with Epic Games on this project specifically, it became very clear to us that our visions were very much aligned in making the best technology and tools available to literally anyone. Epic has been focused on multiple industries for a long time, and what's exciting now being a part of Epic Games is that we are helping champion that convergence. And it has been exciting to contribute even more to the industries like automotive, which have very particular needs as far as content is concerned, with elements that are based truly in the real world on physical products. For each of these verticals, removing as much of the guesswork as possible is essential for creating these high quality renderings. And in working closer with each of these industries, it's been exciting to see these teams rely more on a library of assets to where they remove a lot of the guesswork for the work that they are doing. And as part of Epic Games, we're really excited with what the team at Twinmotion is doing now. we're actually collaborating very closely with them in revitalizing some of the content that was making up the original Twinmotion library, and we'll be expanding that effort in the coming months. Another exciting vertical that Epic has been spearheading is the film initiative, and it's been incredibly exciting to be a part of this in providing content for demos such as this, which we did for SIGGRAPH of last year.
And this new workflow is called virtual production. And virtual production essentially fuses traditional filmmaking with real-time workflows to allow for a next generation of entertainment, fueled by the digital prop house that is Megascans.
So we've also created a really easy way for users to browse the Megascans library in Bridge. And as you can see here, you can browse with collections or search features using names and keywords. But ultimately, the idea with this application is very simply to make it incredibly simple to bring assets into Unreal Engine. So as you're seeing in these really simple examples on screen here, I'm exporting a whole slew of assets, and with just a single click, my shaders, my log chains, and everything is set up, and I can just start being creative immediately inside of my scene.
Mixer allows you to take creative control over the entire Megascans library by defining your own style, and you can create endless variations of any single asset within the library.
And one of the big updates that we've made to Quixel Mixer just within the last couple weeks actually is full 3D functionality. Now we can paint either an existing Megascans library asset, or you can bring in your own custom asset like we're showing here. Stylization is also a really important aspect of what we're hoping to achieve with Mixer, and bringing in a physically based scanned photorealistic asset and maybe making it look like something that could fit inside of Fortnite is something that is now entirely possible using this tool.
As you can see, this is not very photoreal looking, but we've actually leveraged a lot of the Megascans library and turned it into stylized assets using Mixer. So this is a work in progress, but let's look at some of the techniques that we use to create some of these assets here in the scene. So imagine you have this Megascans asset, or maybe an asset that you've even scanned on your own, or something that you've sculpted in ZBrush. Now, you can leverage the Megascans library to completely transform the look of this asset and maybe fit it into a different type of biome. But with Mixer, you can also take it even a step further by defining your own unique style. And this is what we see here. So here's a smart material preset that we created using Mixer that transforms any scanned asset into something that looks a little bit more painterly. So here's another example where we've taken the scanned wheelbarrow and transformed it into something much more vibrant and painterly. And now this retextured asset would make much more sense in a stylized scene like the one we just saw. And so we're working to extend Mixer with more functionality to allow you to stylize assets in this fashion, also adding many more smart materials that ship for free with the software.
And again, drawing back to our original experience in developing Quixel Suite, smart materials are one of the most important elements of this release, in that we really want users to very quickly be able to make some simple modifications and retexture an asset incredibly fast.
On top of that, we're working to bring multiple texture set support and UDIM support to Mixer in the next big release.
Let's take a really simple example of what Mixer can do here, and I'm going to create a very simple tiling material. As you can see, I'm able to browse the full Megascans library in the same way that we were browsing Bridge earlier. And for this specific example, I'm going to use a height-based blend to bring some dirt into some of the cracks and crevices of this existing wooden plank texture. We also have some pretty cool asset types. An atlas here is what I'm going to be drawing on for this specific example. And I want these leaves to actually be setting in some of the cracks and just breaking up the surface a little bit more than what we have before. And as you can see, I'm just feathering the threshold slightly in order to bring some of these elements into the range that I'm looking for. And the same applies here for this simple pebble texture. And the next thing I'm going to do here is actually bring this distressed wood and bark texture into this asset. And this will just sort of give it a little bit of a breakup on the surface. And lastly, I'll go ahead and just add in some simple puddles here on the surface to where we can actually get some really nice reflections once we bring this into Unreal Engine. And as we were touching on before in the bridge section, it's really important for making sure that it is easy to bring assets directly into Unreal Engine. So as you can see here, I just with a single click was able to export the mix and the variation of what I just made in Mixer. And I'm going to start painting a really simple blend using a vertex blend material here inside of the engine. Now, one of the things that's really cool about this is that I'm able to obviously paint either a clean and simple version of the texture and mix that with a distressed and more beat up version of this texture and do that live here inside of the viewport. Now, I'm using the Megascans material that ships with our plugin, but it's important to note that if you're using your own master material for your project, you can actually use that master material as the input to have all of your shaders be hooked up automatically. All you need to do is just delineate each individual input, be it albedo, roughness, normal, displacement, or what have you, and you can construct these shaders very quickly with a single click just using Bridge and the Megascans plugin inside of the engine. So while we're here in the engine, why don't we go over the Megascans plugin in case you guys haven't seen it before. Now, as you can see here, there's a couple simple checkboxes that are automatically on. The first one here is the auto-populate foliage painter, and what this does is for any scatter debris or any elements that you might look to add as like vegetation into your level, those can actually be indicated to go directly into the foliage painter. This allows you to drop in a huge amount of plants and leaves and whatever you're going to be scattering in your scene and have that directly dropped in so you don't have to go from the content browser and drag that content back in. On top of that, if you see below here, this is the enable LOD setup, and what this will do is will allow you to actually have a LOD chain set up for anything that you have downloaded. And what's super convenient about this obviously is that since everything in the Megascans library is LODed from LOD 0 all the way through LOD 5, as well as an included cinematic high master mesh, you can actually have Unreal automatically create that LOD chain for you. As long as you have the existing inputs here to be able to create that chain, all you need is to be able to select inside of Bridge the correct LOD for your target mesh, and then all the other meshes that will go below it that you have downloaded will actually go directly into your LOD chain. And just to illustrate this point, I've pulled up the military water bottle that was used to set dress this scene. And as you can see here on import, I was able to get all my different LODs and everything set up by default. Now the only thing I need to do after this is actually just indicate at what distance I want each LOD to switch. Prompt before batch import does exactly what you would think it would do. The enable displacement checkbox is here, which will allow you to, on any surface that you're going to be using displacement maps, you can actually indicate this, and when you turn up the tessellation on an object, you'll actually get that undulation from the displacement maps. Apply to selection is very simple in that if you have a surface that you're exporting from Bridge, you can actually have objects in your scene selected, and that will apply it on import. And then if you indicate that you want to import master material textures, this will take away any elements that you don't have for your material, like curvature or ambient occlusion or anything therein. You can also override your various materials here on a per object basis, or per asset type rather, so you can say for a 3D object, I can say this is the master material that I want, indicate it here from my level, and as long as everything is named correctly, all the different inputs will go directly into the shader that you indicate here. Same applies for surface master materials, and plants are also here as well. They're obviously a little bit different of a setup than what you would have for a regular surface, in that there's some subsurface scattering to take into consideration, and just a couple of the features that really make vegetation shine. And lastly, the create material blend, which I just demoed in the previous frames. This is the ideal way to work with Megascans in conjunction with Unreal Engine. We support all the different engine versions that you might see, and now that we're a part of Epic, we'll be a lot more proactive in actually getting these plugins ready to go for subsequent versions of the engine. Real quick, I'd like to show you guys the master material that ships with the plugin, and as you can see here, it's very simple. We didn't want to overcomplicate this in that we really wanted just to give the users enough features to be able to maybe make some simple edits to their meshes or surfaces or vegetation upon import. And here's an instance for one of those assets after having gone through the process of being imported into our scene. As you can see here, I can change the tiling values, maybe offset the UVs in U or V coordinates. I can change the albedo tint, maybe indicate whether or not it's actually metallic. And then obviously roughness and normal intensity are super useful for just dialing in exactly the look of the asset once you've dropped it in. If there are any other features you guys would like to see that we could ship with our next version of the plugin, definitely feel free to drop us a comment or a question here at the end of the webinar. And like we mentioned before, now that 3D functionality is inside of Quixel Mixer, one of the things that you can do here very quickly is bring existing Megascans materials and assets and manipulate them slightly in order to maybe ground them a little bit more in my scene. Now, for the scene that we were just working inside, I want to take this jerry can and make some very simple modifications to it. In grounding the asset, maybe have some mud and some sand build up on the top. And what's really cool about this is that I'm, again, using all Megascans materials in order to just very quickly make a variation of this asset that fits more inside of the scene that I'm working inside. I'm also bringing in some simple imperfections and just adjusting the contrast on this albedo as well. Because again, I really want just to ground this asset a little bit more into what it is that we're working inside. And of course, now just bringing it into our scene, as you can see, with just a single click, I've got this jerry can into my scene and it's just so much more grounded than it was before.
So we have a lot of content in the making right now, and I thought I'd show you some of the scan trips that we went on to create these assets. Right here, we see an Arctic environment in the north of Sweden. One of the most highly requested materials in the Megascans library is snow. And so we went here for a couple of weeks to scan basically any type of snow you could imagine, both as surfaces and 3D assets. We also scanned an old abandoned mansion, straight out of a horror movie, essentially. Some cave systems, old derelict abandoned factories and industrial sites, abandoned hospitals. And if you're an avid user of the Megascans library, you might recognize some of these environments because they actually already exist to a certain extent in the library. This is from our recent Japan trip. And we went here to primarily scan ancient temples, but we also captured villages, some city materials, nature, just a whole bunch of things that will allow you to create Japan in great detail. So we go on all of these trips purely based on requests. So if you have something very specific in mind that you absolutely need, never hesitate to reach out to us because that's exactly how we build the library. No request is too insane. Just shoot it our way and you might be lucky.
So we spent the better part of 8 years creating tutorial content on our YouTube channel, and we're continuing that in a really exciting way going forward. We'll be making a wide variety of different tutorials in deconstructing environments that we find to be particularly interesting for our audience. We're giving you guys a quick sneak peek at one of the upcoming tutorials that we'll be doing an actual mini-series on here inside of Unreal Engine. One of the things that we're really excited to announce today is that every tutorial and environment that we'll be creating going forward will actually be free and available for any user in the Unreal Engine marketplace to download. We're really excited about this because it will allow our users to be able to follow along with us and really be able to deconstruct all the elements that make up these environments.
And here's another environment that we're looking forward to putting up on the marketplace. All of these environments serve a greater purpose of showing how creative you can be with the Megascans library and also leveraging the toolset that comes with the Megascans ecosystem. So for instance, taking Megascans assets and retexturing them, bringing in your own assets and texturing them with Megascans materials to kind of just bring everything together. So for these tutorial series, we really want to make it very easy for you to dive into the ecosystem, to grab these environments, to be in the environments, just help demystify the process of environment creation as much as we possibly can. This is something that we're looking forward to having up on the marketplace very soon, so stay tuned.
Teddy, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the new elements that'll be coming into the library?
Sure. One of the new elements that we're introducing is modular content, essentially real-world 3D objects that have been conformed to very specific measurements so that they work very nicely with procedural systems.
One new asset type that we're really excited to dive even further into is drone scans. We've built an entire team around drones, and we're really excited about the types of content that are actually coming out of this initiative. So definitely keep your eyes out for some amazing drone scans coming up in the near future. Before we start taking some of your guys' questions, there's a couple of things that I'd like to highlight here, just in case you haven't seen some of the resources that are available for you in the Quixel community. The first resource being the forum, and this is just a great place to go in case you have any questions that you think might have already been answered by some of the other users in the community. On top of that, you're able to create support tickets that will allow you to be put in contact with our team. All of our tickets end up having a very quick response time, so feel free to reach out to us on the forum if you haven't had a chance to check this out yet. We've recently revitalized the educational offering, and while it's important to note that if you are an educator or a student that is working inside of the Unreal Engine ecosystem, you do have access to everything for free that we mentioned today, including Bridge, Mixer, and the entire breadth of the Megascans library. However, it's important to note that if you're an institution that might be teaching other tools, we do have an offering that will fit your needs. While it is a limited offering of in the hundreds of assets still, you have access to Bridge and Mixer available for your educators and all the students at your school. It's a really simple application process, so feel free to check out our site in case you haven't already. We've also been hard at work on our Instagram page, and we curate some amazing content from our community here that's definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. Here you'll see updates for live streams as well as any type of news that might come out of the community. And just in case you haven't seen already, we do lots of puns, so fair warning.
And Instagram is actually a great way to stay up to date with all of the new content that we put up in the library. We create visualizations of this content to help inspire you creatively. And here are a few of those renders.
And the last thing that we'd like to point you guys towards is definitely our YouTube channel. And we'll be doing a ton of content on this channel over the coming years. And we're still playing around with the format a little bit here. So you might see a wide variety of different content here, be it Mixer tutorials, environment breakdowns, features for actual projects that are using Megascans, and the like. Also, if you guys have any general ideas about the types of content that you'd like to see from our channel going forward, definitely feel free to drop us a comment or leave us a question here at the end of the webinar. We'd really love to hear what you guys want. And the most requested asset type by far and away has always been trees. And we have heard you guys loud and clear.
Yeah, for about 3 years now, we've been working on developing a tree pipeline to allow for photorealistic real-time trees. And while we're not done yet, we wanted to give you a sneak peek into some of that work.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to the webinar today. We're really excited about everything that's coming in the future. And now that we're a part of Epic Games, the exciting part truly is that they're looking to put rocket fuel into everything that we were already doing. So the future is incredibly bright, and we're just excited to have you guys along for the ride with us.
We hope you had fun watching this. There will obviously be much more coming than what we've covered today. And now we're super pumped to take your questions, so feel free to ask whatever you like.